Let's talk a bit about Excel printouts. In other words, printing out our Excel documents. Printing out our Excel documents is probably one of the more challenging things in Excel. The first challenge that you have in Excel is setting up your worksheet and selecting the right functions and making sure that everything is working right. But then you get the second challenge, which is transferring your results from Excel to paper and making sure they don't look like crap. Now, a lot of things can go wrong when you're printing Excel spreadsheets, and I'm going to give you a few tips to help you along in making sure that you actually produce a readable, attractive document when you're printing out Excel spreadsheets. Okay, stuff you need to consider to get your Excel printouts right. Number one, think about printing before you start your worksheet. Think about what you're going to do at the end with the worksheet that you're using. Are you going to transfer those tables to a Word document? Are you going to transfer it to a PowerPoint presentation? Or do you have to print a report directly from your Excel? For example, if you're designing a form, then start with that in mind. Okay, know that the form is going to be paper-based and you have to limit yourself to a design that can fit on one page comfortably. Now, if what you're doing is simply a calculation and data processing and you don't plan on printing out your worksheet, well, then you probably don't need to worry a whole lot about how you organize your data, more than you need to worry about it in order to make your data comprehensible. So always start with the end in mind and think about printing before you start your worksheet. Second tip, watch those font sizes. Okay, things look a lot bigger on the screen than on paper. For example, if I zoom in to this worksheet, the letter looks huge. I mean, you look at this and you say, well, that letter looks just about right, maybe a little too big for what it's supposed to be, but it looks okay. And then you print it out and you get something like this. See, the letters occupy about half the page, not like this, where it gives you the impression that the letters are going to occupy almost all the page. So watch your font size. Notice that by default, Excel uses a font size of about 10. That's a bit small in my opinion. Some people might like letter size 10. But I think that it's easier to read if you set it to 11 or 12. So always print out a couple of test pages and see how big your fonts really are. And remember that things are going to look a lot bigger on the screen than they are on paper. Third tip related to paper, select the right paper size. And remember that there's a paper size called tabloid. You have your standard letter size page, which is 8.5 by 11 inches. Everyone knows that size. And it's the size that everyone in America, at least, uses 99% of the time. Then you have the legal size, which is normally 8.5 by 14 inches. A lot of people don't like that paper size because it doesn't fit in correctly with the 8.5 by 11 letter sizes. I mean, legal is mainly used for that purpose, for legal documents. And a lot of people don't like to use it for their printed Excel spreadsheets. But there's a third paper size, which is called tabloid. It turns out the tabloid size, at least in the US and Canada, is 11 inches by 17 inches. This can be 11 inches high by 17 wide or 17 high by 11 wide, depending on how you configure it. Now, a regular letter paper size is 8.5 by 11 inches. Tabloid is 11 inches by 17 inches, which means that if you put a letter size page on top of this one, this side is going to align perfectly with the letter size page in height. In other words, nothing's going to be sticking out the ends of your report or whatever. Where it's going to stick out is on the side, but you can solve that really easily by folding this page inward correctly so that it fits in with the rest of the document. Tabloid page size is a way to print out your documents in which you can have a whole lot more space for your numbers on the page, and it won't wreck the aesthetics of your printed document. Take a look at this picture that I found on the internet. This is more or less the idea of what you need to do. In other words, if you have a tabloid page, it's going to stick out of this end, and what you do is you fold it inwards so it fits in with the rest of the document. And the height of the page is the same as the letter size paper, so it doesn't stick out right here on the ends. So that's another thing to consider. Remember that you have tabloid paper. You might have to find a printer that can do tabloid sizes, or go to your local copy center and they can probably print tabloid for you. So always remember that when you're doing documents, Tabloid is a good option for getting more paper space when you need it for your Excel printouts. Also, configure the right page orientation. Remember that you can put your page in two different formats. You can use this one, which is called portrait format, or you can use this one, which is called landscape format. Landscape format can give you a whole lot more space horizontally if you have several columns. And it's very popular with people who do spreadsheets for reports or for printed documents. They'll often give you a printout where the columns run along the short end of the page and not along the long end. In general, landscape orientation is better suited for Excel printouts. So that's another one. Configure your right page orientation. Now set your print area correctly. Okay, remember that every Excel spreadsheet has a print area, which you need to set in order to make sure that you don't occupy paper space with stuff that you don't really need. If you have a bunch of columns that are doing calculations that are irrelevant to your spreadsheet, well, you might as well not print those. So use the print area in Excel to define only the data that you need to print on the paper. Also, I mentioned this a little while back, but decide whether or not you really need all the columns on your spreadsheet. I mean, like I said before, many times you have a whole lot of columns which are intermediate calculations that are irrelevant to your final result, and nobody's really interested in seeing them. It's better to leave those out, just hide them or move them to another part of the page where they won't be printed out, and print out only the essential data on your paper. If someone asks how you arrived at that result, well, you could probably give them a copy of the spreadsheet and they can see it for themselves. Or you can create a separate printout with the calculation detail. But for starters, just print out the essential information that's necessary to understand the results that you got in Excel. Use the print preview before you print. I see this way too many times. You go to an office and you look at their printer and it turns out there's this huge pile of paper next to the printer with a huge amount of Excel spreadsheets that printed out wrong. Okay, that where they got the margins wrong, where they got the pages wrong. And well, that paper just sat there because someone sent it to the printer. It printed out. They got there and they said, oh man, I messed up the printout. And they just left the paper there. Wasted paper, wasted toner. You know, always use the print preview before you send your documents to the printer. In fact, Excel doesn't let you print out with a print preview anymore. Every time you select File and go to Print, you get the preview of what you're going to get right here. That was a really good move by Excel. I'm sure it saved a whole lot of trees in the years that they've had this option where you can't print out unless you see the print preview before. So always use the print preview and use it to guide yourself in organizing your spreadsheet. Also, remember that scaling is not the solution to everything. I see this way too often. Someone has a huge spreadsheet and it won't fit on a page, so they do this. They tell Excel, okay, fit all the columns into one page. And in the end, you get something with a microscopic font size that you can't read and you can't understand. So remember, scaling is not the answer to everything. What you need to do is start by correctly organizing your spreadsheet and correctly selecting the data that you're going to print. Don't start by scaling your document, because if you start by scaling, you're not going to get a good result. Scaling should be the last step in setting up your printout. And don't be afraid to create a separate report page. Going back to the case we just saw, if I have this huge spreadsheet with a huge number of stores and a huge number of region codes, and what I'm going to report in the end is the monthly sales volume per region. I mean, I can take this spreadsheet, consolidate the results. Maybe right here at the end, I can add a total per region or something else. And then I can create a second page on my spreadsheet, which is the report that I'm going to print out that links back to the results that I have here. And that means that I can have all these numbers on my spreadsheet, which are necessary for the calculation. But in the end, what I print out is a simple report page with 2 or 3 columns that can fit on one regular old letter size paper. So don't be afraid to create a separate report page. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a quick example. Let's say that I got this spreadsheet that I want to print out. This is a weekly volume report for a couple of stores. Okay, how would I organize this if I wanted to print it out on paper? Well, the first thing I do is press Control P to get a print preview. You see, or you can go to File, Print, and there's your print preview. So that's the first thing you need to do to see what exactly you're getting on the paper. As you can see, I'm getting this comments column, and I'm seeing this running total here, and I'm missing a column right here on the end. Now, a very interesting thing that happens when you pull up the print preview. Number one, you get a total number of pages that you're going to print. Normally, it's down here where you see if something went drastically wrong with your Excel spreadsheet. If you see page 1 of 35 and you have a 5-page document, well, something's wrong. And Excel is generating a whole lot more pages than it really needs to. Why does it generate more pages? Well, normally because of this. You have one column that sticks out, and so Excel puts it out on its own separate page. Okay, so that's the first thing I've noticed here, that I'm missing one column, which is printing out of bounds. It's going to page 2. And when I exit here, notice that my Excel spreadsheet gets these little dotted gray lines in the background. Those little dotted gray lines are the page limits. In other words, this is going to be page 1, this is going to be page 2, this is going to be page 3, and as I can see here, this column percent of total is sticking out of the page, which is what I saw in my print preview. Okay, so what would I do here? Well, I would start by analyzing what exactly it is I want from this spreadsheet. I want to report sales volume, and I want to report a running total to see how it evolved over time. And I have this column which is called percent of total, which is interesting to look at, but I don't think it's entirely relevant. I mean, in the end, you have these numbers which are very uniform, and they're not really that easy to grasp and not that relevant on these weeks. So I'm not sure that this percent of total column is actually relevant to my printout. So for the time being, I'm going to hide this, and now my sheet fits on one page. Now, what else can I do here? Well, this thing has 2 decimal places, and in all cases, the decimal places are 0. And that's not really adding a whole lot to the readability of my document. In fact, it's really uncomfortable to be seeing all these zeros here. You can't really understand whether this is $244 or $24,400 unless you really look at it. So what I'm going to do, and what I suggest you do always, is remove the decimal places from your numbers. Unless you really need them for some reason, but for the most part, you probably won't need them. Also, a very important thing, notice here that these are kilo dollars, in other words, thousands of dollars. If you have $1,281,000 and you're doing a general report to see what your sales volume is, you probably don't need those $981. Or right here, if this is $913,562, you probably don't need those $562. To you, it might seem like a lot of money, $562, but to the guy, to the executive that's looking at a sales volume of $4 million, trust me, $562 really aren't going to worry him that much in this case. So you can leave those $562 out and simply type your numbers in thousands of dollars. That's going to save you some space. Speaking of space, there's a lot of wasted space in this column, you see. They adjusted it to the title, which is sales volume, so the title fits in the column, but you get all this wasted space right here next to the numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink down this column, and I'm going to use the wrap text option up here to get that text to wrap. And now my column becomes a lot smaller, and there's a lot less white space right here. Same thing with this running total. This running total is way too wide, and now it looks a whole lot better. And finally, I have this comments column here. See, there's only 2 comments and the rest of the space is wasted. I think that I can better do this by adding a column called notes. And in that column, what I'm going to do is 1, Okay, this needs to go to text, so I'm going to use the text format on this cell. This is one of those cases where you might want to use text if you're going to use parentheses so that Excel doesn't think that you're writing a negative number. And what I'm going to do here is add a number 2. And these 2 notes, I'm going to take this note, put it down here. I'm going to take this note, put it down here, and I'm going to say 1 and 2. And now I can get rid of this comments column, which is mainly wasted space. See right there. So now you read the numbers, you read the running total, and you see this notes column. If you notice here, there's note number 1. Okay, what's note number 1? You go down here, it says big sales event, 50% off. Okay, that's great. That's what happened that week. And number 2, store close. Okay, that's what happened that week. And look at all the space we've gotten back with only those modifications. We've been at this, 3-4 minutes? And already we've recovered a whole lot of space, which was previously wasted on our page. And now our Excel spreadsheet prints perfectly on one page. In fact, I can go right here to page layout, page setup, and what I'm going to do is tell Excel to center the printout on my page horizontally and vertically. And that's going to look a little bit better. You know, maybe I could widen these columns to get it to balance a little bit better, because right there it looks a little thin on the page, lots of space to the sides. Maybe if I do that, and a little bit like that, and a little bit like that, and maybe give this week column a little more breathing room, and that looks a whole lot better. And there you go. There you have an example of how you can recover a lot of paper space and make your printouts actually fit on an 8.5 by 11 inches page without having to resort to weird methods or scaling in Excel. Thanks for watching this video tutorial. If you liked the video, be sure to subscribe to our channel and to visit our website, cubicleoverlords.com, for more instructional videos like this one.